The confusion for us was every time we ran trainings, people would say to us, this is the best thing we have ever experienced in our lives. We were that good, but we just felt the world needs to hear us, but we're not getting jobs with the world.
My father told me life is not a bitter road.
This is Origins Africa podcast, where we explore the origin stories of people who have made and are making their dreams come true, asking the what, the when, the how, and the why. I'm Oshaya, and on this episode, the concluding part of our chat with Bankole Williams, we explore Bankole leaving Guaranty Trust Bank to start his consulting career at Visible Impact. Moving on from there to start Edgeecution with Steve Harris, and then moving on to birth LYD Consulting. We also talk about his lessons, challenges, habits, and practices. Bankole is the founder and principal consultant at LYD Consulting, as well as the founder of a youth entrepreneurship scheme called Live Your Dreams Africa. He's often regarded as the mind surgeon. Over the last episode, we talked about the early childhood fascinations which set Bankole on the path he's on today.
I've always been fascinated by human behavior, right? I noticed that from when I was really young. I'd ask the questions that every other person wouldn't want to ask, why do human beings act the way they do? Why will Mr. A act like this and Mr. B, faced with the same, circumstance or situation, act totally differently? I found it very, very fascinating, right? And I was also fascinated by pain. When I mean fascinated, not like I enjoyed pain, but I was intrigued by how it's influenced, people's reactions and how it ultimately determined the kinds of ways they manifested in life. And I was fascinated by the opportunity to take away pain, right? And I wanted to see how I could be a part of the solution to the pain that people are experiencing in the world.
The light bulb moment he had meeting Fela Duratoye.
My third year in university, a gentleman by the name Fela Duratoye came to speak to us in school. And I'll never forget that experience because I was so fascinated by everything he said. I was not just fascinated by what he said, I was fascinated by him and whatever it was that he did and represented because, I felt like, remember the story of Elizabeth and Mary? I felt like my baby leapt in the presence of him.
Leaving the rap group that evolved into Rooftop MCs that we know today.
At a point, we had, some of us had to leave. And I think that that's life for you. You get to a point where you need to be able to evaluate whether something can exist in your future.
Starting a career in human resources at Guaranty Trust Bank, as well as the experiences that led him to laying himself off after 4 years in the worst economic recession the banking sector's experienced.
Now, prior to August, I had begun to sense it. I wasn't clear. A few things had happened. For the first time in my career, I had not been promoted. And my boss had told me, that the only reason she didn't promote me is she just needs me to know that it's not every year you get it, right? And I approached her like 4 times, same thing. I just want you to know it's not every year you get it, And I recall that one time I'd left her office thinking, I can imagine how it must feel to be in her shoes, to be this powerful, to be the head of HR. And the minute I thought that thought, I rejected it almost immediately. And I was wondering, why am I resisting a path, a destination that I am on? If I continued on my path, I was sometime going to become the head of HR somewhere. But all of a sudden, that position seemed so unattractive to me. And then I thought to myself, why are you on the path for which you do not desire the end, right? And I realized that I had been climbing a ladder that possibly had been placed on the wrong wall. You know, because I was not, you're climbing a ladder, you want to get to the top.
But you knew you weren't interested in becoming the head of HR.
Yeah. So I guess it was a moment of introspection for me. Like, okay, so how long are you going to continue this way? So I'd started, really processing and thinking and saying to myself, if you because I was doing very well. And I knew that if I continued, I was one of the guys who people looked at and they just thought this guy has a future in this organization. If I knew that I'll keep getting promoted, I'll keep rising, and it will be a lot harder. By the time you start introducing some nice perks to the job, it will be a lot harder to leave. And I didn't want to be in that position. So I just felt, you're young, what's the worst that can happen? You come back to beg for your job. I just thought this is the time to make some kinds of seemingly drastic decisions. I left at a time when it didn't make sense to people to leave. I left in the peak of the economic recession, right? I don't think there's been a time in the history of banking where banks laid off like they did at the time. A lot of banks were laying off. My bank was the only bank that wasn't laying people off. And yet I laid myself off. Right? So people thought I lost my mind. Like, there are people praying for this job that you want. But I just knew it was time. I knew. It's a difficult decision to make, but I made it. And today I look back and I'm grateful. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
Have you saved some funds?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Like I said, I'd begun to sense it. So I made sure that I put some money aside, right, in preparation for this decision. I could have put more money aside, to be honest. But so this is what I say when it comes to making decisions like this or transitions. I think that it's something you prepare for. The only clause I would add is if you strongly sense that God has given you an express instruction, which is why my case is a bit of an exception. I knew that it was the right thing to do, and it was a clear instruction that I'd gotten, right? Some other people live and they live on a whim, and I don't think that's foolishness. That's not wise, right? And even at that, in as much as I'd gotten an instruction, I still ensured that I had a financial cushion, right? I even started a business on the side to ensure that I could cater to my needs and all, because I was leaving to earn less than half of what I was earning as a banker. So that was it was a massive hit, so to speak, on my finances. But I knew I needed to learn. I knew that I was learning from an amazing person who was an indication of my future.
Did you immediately have a job offer?
Yeah, kind of. So before I left, I had already started having conversations with Fela, and Steve at the time. Right.
So you returned from the conference or meeting in August and started engaging Fela and Steve on.
Yeah, maybe not immediately, but I wanted to just gain to be certain.
Okay.
But the interactions already started before.
Yeah, you mentioned
even though I hadn't expressed to them that I wanted to work with them.
Okay.
Now, what was happening was Steve, for instance, will be running trainings for different organizations, and I would go sit in his class. I still had a 9-to-5, but weekends he'll be running training for another bank, and I would go sit in his class and take notes like my life was dependent on it. And it was because I knew I was going to do this. I just wasn't sure when, right? So everywhere I knew Fela spoke at, I was there. And funny thing was, I wasn't so big on always being visible to him. I just needed to be, any material he had, I had bought it, I'd listened to it. I was so big on listening to him. I remember one time on a Saturday, I went to see a friend of mine somewhere in Bagada, right? And she was in a salon and two ladies were talking, and they were talking about how, Fela is coming to their church. I was eavesdropping on their conversation. right? And they said, I thought they said Guiding Light Assembly.
Okay.
So there and then I had concluded that was the church I was going to the following day. I wasn't going to go to my church, right? I didn't ask them anything. I just heard them saying, Fela is coming to our church. And I thought it was Guiding Light Assembly. So the following Sunday, I dressed up early, went to Guiding Light Assembly. They were having Sunday school. You know, it didn't look like anything was happening, you know. So I was sitting there and then I asked the person beside me, like, hold on. How much time does the service start? Did they not say Fela is coming? The person like, who is Fela? Say, like last Sunday, didn't they announce? She said, no, that is a normal. So there's a problem. I went out, called my friend.
Okay.
Thankfully, she picked, right? I said to her, you know, I know this is weird, but that salon, there were two ladies who were there. She had to call the owner of the shop.
Are you serious?
Yeah. To call one of the two ladies who now said it was Grace Assembly in Ikeja. Guiding Light Assembly is in Parkview in Ikoyi.
Whoa.
So she got back to me to say it was Grace Assembly. If you see the way I was flying on Third Mainland Bridge just to get to Grace Assembly so that I could be seated somewhere in the back to just take notes. Right? That's how convinced I was of this. I just wasn't sure. It wasn't an easy decision to make, you know, one. I wasn't sure when, but, you know, all of these pieces were fitting gradually up until I got the clear instruction and I knew it was time. It was time to leave.
Before we move on to what happened after Bankole left Guaranty Trust Bank, let's explore what growing up was like for him.
Growing up was very, very interesting. Like I said, I was a quiet kid. I grew up in a home where my dad, I had a dad that was tough, right? And at the time, I didn't really like him because I felt he was just tough, you know. But I love today. Obviously, I love him. You know, I love my parents. You know, my siblings. You know, growing up with my siblings was also very interesting. You know, and with my mom. I have an elder brother who was and still is a mentor to me. So even when I was doing bad things, you know, he was providing mentorship in that regard, right? But an amazing brother, an amazing sister who's very kind. We're just three kids, right? And I've watched my parents evolve over time. So there's more love right now in the home.
Are we taking the picture? Because when you say there's more love now, Chris asked then what it was like.
It was tough. My father was a hard man. Right? He was a disciplinarian and he was proud to be one. And like I said, for someone who is a quiet kid, right, you tend to, that causes the person to recoil into their shell, right? So I was not so it's amazing that there is the Bankole Williams that's a speaker today. I was quiet, right? But guess what? I do believe that there was a potential to have even started finding expressions for this a lot earlier. But all of that was contained, you know, by the experiences that I had, you know, growing up with my dad being that way.
Did it affect your esteem?
Oh yeah, it did.
Okay.
I was not as confident as I am today, right? I was a shy child, you know, so there were things that I'd want to do, but I wouldn't do them. That's because I lacked the confidence to, you know, to do those things, you know. But thankfully, over the years, I've been able to.
Then picturing the guy who had Bank training in school, had nodded and stared intently at the person.
Yeah.
Evolution.
So which is why, you know, in fairness to my parents, to be very honest, there are loads of benefits tied to how I was raised, in the sense that I was cultured right.
Okay.
You know, I had and still have the right morals. There are just certain things that I don't think are proper. You know, that's how I was raised, right? But I also think that there's effective balance between teaching morals, ensuring that you have your kids are disciplined, but it's the how that matters, right? It's not just disciplining them, it's how you go about it, right? And how you do what you do is more important than what you do. So there was that. But what also really helped me was, I guess my associations, right? For instance, when I was in the University of Lagos, I told you about the fellowship I was in. That gave me room to express my talent. We were taught to be independent. We were taught, there's a phrase we always used to make. We used to say, make it happen, right? We were taught, I still remember a quote. We said this thing so many times that it is not in my wiring to give excuses, right? You make it happen. You don't give excuses. You get results. Then would say excuses are tools of the incompetent. They are monuments of nothing. They that use them are not wise, right? And rarely make it in life, right? I learned that from being in that fellowship, right? So you had to make it. You had to get results, and you can't get results if you're not confident to put yourself out there, right? So all those things, helped in my development. And I also think that, God is just a master chess player. Everything adds up. If I had not had that kind of upbringing, I would not be able to provide the solutions that I'm providing for people today. I would not be able to empathize with their situations and circumstances. I don't think I would even be as intrigued about human behavior and being passionate about, resolving pain and issues that people had. And it's because I had some of those experiences and I needed a way out and I wasn't finding answers, right? And I kept asking questions, and it's those questions that have led to the discoveries that I have found today that have created solutions that I'm implementing for either individuals or organizations that are producing really, really astounding results today.
So after leaving the bank, Bankole joined Fela at his company, Visible Impact. But was it all Bankole had expected it to be?
So I worked with Fela Durute, one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And I learned, I picked up a whole lot at the time. Steve was heading consulting. I was learning about the consulting practice and all of that. And at a point, the vision of the organization was changing. Fela is an amazing individual who is so passionate about this nation and has been that way for God knows how many years. And he kept saying to us, talking about his frustrations with the nation, how we need to begin to build leaders who will build Nigeria, right? He began to lose his, so to speak, interest for consulting, or his interest for consulting was being translated in his interest for developing people to build this nation. So the vision was changing. We were changing from being a management consulting practice to being a foundation. I wanted to do consulting. So it was difficult, right? So it was about the same time Steve and I, we left because we really wanted to do this whole consulting thing, right?
Just one question, sorry. So you left banking, you joined Visible Impact. It was what you had wanted to do for a long time. Whilst you were there, did you have doubts at any point in time whilst you were there? It was all validating, affirming experiences you had?
It was definitely something that was validating for me.
Okay.
It was. There were times, the doubts for me were more with respect to my needs. When you live a certain quality of life and standard of living and everything, and then now you're having to earn less than half of what you used to earn, right? And at the time, I joined the organization also at a time when, like I said, it was the peak of the recession. So banks were laying people off, right? And one of the things that banks started doing was that they stopped training. They were trying to manage their costs. So we were a management consulting practice offering training services. So it was also a difficult time for the organization because we did a lot. Our primary focus was banks, and that line on their budget, that expense line was being taken off. So it was also a tough period, for the business. And that's very understandable, but your bills don't understand, what you're going through. So those are the kinds of things that were flying in my head. But as to whether I made the right decision or not, I had absolutely no doubts. It was definitely the right decision to make.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue. Then you and Steve left.
Yeah. So we left, and we both were passionate about consulting, and we decided, let's see how we can still keep doing this thing and, pushing the whole consulting thing. Right. And, that's how we started, right, our business at the time. And
curiously, how were you? I mean, Steve was already doing it.
Yeah.
And you were just leaving HR, just starting and consulting. Wasn't, maybe it's just me, I don't know. Was there like, I would have thought maybe he would be your senior of some sort, maybe a mentor, or I don't know, you defer to him and that sort of thing. But then you guys left and became co-founders like peers. How were you able to breach that gap?
So remember that I had worked in the bank for a period of time, right? So I had some kind of experience based off, my interactions, in the training arm, right? So there was that, and truth is, really and truly, I learned a whole lot, from even being with him.
Okay.
But beyond that was Steve and I were very, very good friends. We had such an amazing relationship that we had built, right? So interestingly, he had started it, right? And it just felt like, hey, we're both chasing the same clients anyways. Let's see how we can, we can make this thing work, together. And it was a very beautiful experience because for us, we're just young, hungry people, right, who really wanted to show the value that we had to give at the time, right? I had been honing my own skills over time, taking us, like I said, I'd always known I wanted to become a consultant. So even on the side, I had been prepping for this day, developing content, building slides, doing research and all of that, right? And this was just a great opportunity for manifestation, for expression, right? And it was tough, knocking on different doors, trying to sell all the way from the ground up, but it was definitely something that we did with passion and flair and everything that we had. And we became pretty successful at it.
Or were there a number of no's you got?
Oh, definitely.
Doors shut in your face.
It's many. There were times he and I would sit and would just... Well, the confusion for us was every time we ran trainings, people would say to us, this is the best thing we have ever experienced in our lives. We were that good, but we just felt the world needs to hear us, but we're not getting jobs with the world, and we were young. So I guess generally in the consulting space, most of the people that were there were much older, people who maybe were executive directors in a bank and then they resigned to start. So I take, for instance, one of the leverage one leverage I also had was relationships I'd built as a banker, right? To be able to also try to open certain doors. So I had tried to do business with the organization I worked with at the time. I guess the challenge was I was young. It's just difficult to process that this young guy who used to work with us now wants to train us. So there were refusals, in that regard. Eventually, the door opened. I remember that there was a time that I had gone back to appreciate one of the heads of HRs of a certain bank, just to say thank you that we're still training. She didn't know we're still training them. And she just looked at me and just saw a young person and brought out some documents and was telling me about how, now we're working with international organizations, that if you really want to work with us, go and partner with one of them. And while she was there, that was the last time I ever did the first and last time. So I did the first training, went to say thank you. And that was the last time I ever did anything with them. So you can imagine going to say thank you and then the meal is taken away from your table, right? And there were several of those, would see bids being put up for, training consulting work, would work for weeks, putting documentation and all those things together, right? Submit the document. I remember one particular one, right? We had to go all the way somewhere in Apapa to submit our documents, and then when we got there, I think the head of that particular parastatal was there. And then he saw us, called us into his office, and he just couldn't understand the courage or the audacity that these young people had to think that they could pitch for this job. And he called us in and he was like, who sent you? So, well, it's confusing. Like, we're the ones running the thing. We sent ourselves. I said, no, you don't understand that you must be coming through someone who is influential in government for you to think that you'll be getting this. And I'm like, no, we just saw an opportunity. We put all our guys sat us down. He said, see, let me help you understand. All that you're seeing in these papers is just protocol.
They've got someone in mind already.
Do you understand? He told us, we already know who we are giving this job to, right? And he kind of like just advised us that the next time you see stuff like this, don't, it's just formality that's in the papers. You have to have someone influential within the organization who is, so to speak, pushing your proposal and stuff like that, right? So those were some of the experiences we had. Imagine putting in the research, the resources, putting in all of that. We'll have meetings, we'll do proposals, do pitches, amazing stuff, have meetings with decision makers. They would love our stuff and they just wouldn't call us. And so there were those frustrations. Yeah. Right. And I think that is normal, because now it's interesting that when people think about, notable people in the industry, in the country, not even just the country, in Africa, they mention our names. They mention my name, Steve, Jimmy, these guys, right? But we have a backstory, right? We've been there, done that, gotten refusals. We've worked hard for the results that, so to speak, people are seeing us manifest today. So all that is I consider normal, right? It's all part of the process, right? People need to recognize that it's a process. It's a process, and it's about the quality of the person you are becoming through the process. Now, I have grown to the point where, there's certain kinds of jobs I just won't take. I'm not interested. I'm very happy to turn down things now. I'm highly sought after in the industry, right? And I'm a lot wiser now. There are things I used to expend my energy on before that now I realize it's not the best use of my energy and my time.
Things like what?
So I'll give you an example. And I also think it's dependent on the stage of life you find yourself in. So we used to write, there's something we used to say then, a proposal a day, is what secures your salary at the end of the month. We used to write proposals like every single day. And those things they groomed us, right? And would send proposals to all the banks. We would and we used to have strategy sessions where we would think about, what are the problems that banks have now? Because we wanted to be relevant to the issues that they had. Would strategize, and develop great content and send to these people, and we'll get no calls, right? And just used to make us wonder, and we'll develop really amazing stuff. Now, what I have learned is it's not just you knocking on doors, it's you having relationships, right? And I think that's something, looking back, that I wish that I knew a lot earlier, and I was more deliberate about building relationships, right, in organizations and socializing and going to the kinds of places where you would have the opportunities to be able to interact with the people that can put in a word or stuff like that, right? And it's just the way life is, right? A relationship just makes it easier. So right now, when I think about an organization, I, aside from trying to just, develop great proposals for them, I'm asking,
Who do I know?
Who do I know? Who do I know? And you must understand the society that you live in. If we were in America, America rewards people based on competence. As in, you can succeed from the way the system is structured. Competence can make you shine, right? In this country, right? You can be so competent and yet you're winking in the dark, man. You sometimes just need somebody to help you, somebody who has access to the light to turn it on for you, or at least just put the spotlight on you, right? And that's one ingredient that I see that is so important for progress in business, right? In the continents that we're in.
In just a moment, we'll talk about Bankole moving on from Edgeecution and starting LYD Consulting, as well as habits and practices that have helped him become who he is today. Stay with us. I'm Osheye, and you're listening to Origins Africa podcast. Hi, dear listener. If you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes and Apple Podcast. You can also send us a tweet or comment on Instagram at OriginsAF. We love to read from you. Nopes, not later. Yes, I read your mind. Do it now. Thanks a lot. Also click the subscribe button and share with a friend. Let's make a difference together, one origin story at a time. Catch our one-to-one newsletter where we share with you one lesson, 2 quotes, and 1 question from each episode published. You'll find it at originsafrica.substack.com. originsafrica.substack.com. If you like it, please click the like button, leave a comment, share with a friend, and subscribe. Also, you can now watch video snippets of some of our guest interviews. Simply go to Origins Africa Podcast on YouTube. Origins Africa Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like our videos, and share. Let's make a difference together, one origin story at a time. Hi guys, welcome back to Origins Africa Podcast. So Bankole is moving on from Edgeecution to start LYD Consulting.
Well, so what had happened was I felt, we both had grown, right? We were both building individual brands whilst we were also trying to build a company. And the truth is, we had to be real and honest with ourselves. It wasn't working, right? Point being, our visions were also, division is when you have 2 visions, right? Look at what I do today. Look at what he does. Steve is very, very big, an amazing guy when it comes to empowering small and medium scale businesses, right? I was bigger on doing business with corporates as a consultant, right? Aside from that, this whole fascination with the mind thing had begun with me. So I knew that I was going to be, as an individual personal brand, this whole mind thing was such a big deal for me, and I was going to be building something really big in that regard. I also had a foundation which I was running, right? Live Your Dreams Africa Foundation, right? And the truth is, for a business, your time is your asset. Now, when your time is being spread in different directions, that's where your passion lies. You're not giving the best to the collective vision that you have. So we had to be, honest with ourselves, right? And
who called who?
What'd you say?
Who called who? And let's have a fun conversation.
Well, we had series. It wasn't a case of, we had series of conversations up until time when it was very clear. I think I also saw that it was necessary for the maintenance of the relationship that we had.
Okay.
Right. I felt it was necessary that I left.
Okay.
Right. It was not an easy decision to make, obviously for both of us, because we'd done stuff together, but it was something that was necessary. Right. And I think that, for both of us, it was, looking at the benefit of hindsight, it was a good thing that we decided to do, because we're, in as much as we do things individually, right, or seemingly separately, we're very collaborative. I'm very supportive of his vision. He's extremely supportive of mine, right? And either ways, we're still succeeding and we're still there for ourselves. So it was important to prioritize the retention of the friendship, the relationship, and all of that. And thankfully, we've been able to do that over the years.
Okay. Habits or practices that helped in building a successful career?
I'd say, as a consultant, one of the things I used to say was, or I still say, is we had an insane work ethic, and giving the customer a great experience. And a great experience for me is doing beyond the expectations. So a mindset of surpassing the expectations of your customer, that is, it's like a fabric of our DNA. That's how I was trained. If you hit the mark, as in the expectation of the customer, you have failed. You must surpass it. That's the way I was. That's the way I was trained. If a customer says that was good, you have failed. If they say that was great, now you're talking. So the consciousness, and it's so down to the way we design the intervention. We design the intervention with that in mind, right? And it's my default wiring, even down to when I am researching for content. I'm looking for content that will give you goose pimples. If it's not going to create and elicit an extraordinary expression of praise, then you haven't begun, right? And I think that mindset, right, is like the engine room that drives the results and the outcomes, that we have. Excellence, whatever your hands find to do it heartily as unto the Lord, and being excellent, going even down to the minutest of details. If you're sending a text, it has to be excellent. Sending a proposal, it has to be excellent, right? It has to be visually appealing. It has to appeal to as many of the 5 physical senses as possible, and this was something that I picked up, just by being with someone like Fela Durtoye, right? Just his flair, love for excellence was palpable. It was so contagious, and that's one of the things that one of the habits that I think is essential, for you to be able to succeed in business.
What else speaking? How were you able to upskill yourself, or maybe to add to that, what rituals do you have, for instance, before you go on a speaking engagement or something?
Yeah, I have a number of rituals. I never take my audience for granted, and I see that happen a lot of times, where you feel you are so good that you can just show up and you'll have a great experience. So preparation is a big deal for me, regardless of where I'm speaking, regardless of the number of times I've spoken on that subject. And it's also comes with my training. So we may have, for instance, maybe a course on business communications. We've done it several times, and we're going to another organization. We're doing the same thing we've done, but there is still the consciousness to tweak, to adjust, to add, to improve, to make better, right? It can't be the same way every single time, right? I have a course called The Science of Astounding Results, and people who have attended the first one are keen to attend the second one because they know they'll hear something different. They know that it will be better. It's always progressive, right? So the consciousness to prepare, as though you're preparing to speak before the president, regardless of who the audience is, right? So I do quite a bit of preparation, research. My staff know if I have a speaking engagement, for instance, tomorrow, the day before, don't put any other activity there, right? I am preparing, and that's because the people are important to me, and you're paying me to give you great value. I can't give you anything less, right? I love to meditate. I spend time meditating, and I generally, what I do is I visualize the impact that the conversation is going to have on people's lives. So I see how people will come to me to tell me how their lives were transformed as a result of what they just heard. And I, with my mind, imagination, creates that experience. I create an experience where I am so deeply grateful for the opportunity or the privilege of sharing with those people. And I believe that what you have in this physical world is a reflection of what you create in your mind. So I spend time doing that. I have a ritual, affirmations that I say. For me, there are certain promises that God has given me, and I just affirm them, right, before I speak. I'm very conscious, very, very conscious of those promises. God told me, He said, Bankole, I have put my words in your mouth. I've hidden you in the shadow of my hands, that I will plant the heavens and lay the foundations of the earth. And that's a promise that I affirm. And I say that the words are not my words, they are His words. Therefore, the impact that the words have when He speaks is the impact that I have when I speak, right? Because they are not my words, they are His words anyways. And I begin to visualize the kind of impact that God's words will have on people's lives. And it's for me a very, very powerful exercise.
So key lessons through your journey. I don't know if it's top 5 or top 3 or top 2. I'll leave that to you. But what are key lessons you want to share? Second one would be, I know you're definitely still evolving. So maybe what are you focused on at the moment, and over the next few years, what should we be looking forward to seeing or hearing about Bankole? Finally, is there, if you were in my shoes, is there a question I haven't asked you yet that you would have asked yourself? In essence, is there anything that you haven't talked about that you think I should have asked and you'd like to share?
Okay, key lessons for me would be, or maybe a key lesson, and for me, it's also ties to what is priority to me right now. What one of the key messages that I have out there, and one of the things I've learned, and one of the most important lessons for me in the course of life is discovering that life, contrary to what we have been made to believe, is supposed to be lived from inside out and not from outside in, right? And I think that the world has just been preconditioned that way, where something needs to happen on the outside to alter the state on the inside, right? And that's how people live. Bad news flies around, you feel bad within. I give you the keys of a brand new car, you feel great within. Where we have become reactionary beings, always being always responding to external stimuli, situations, and circumstances. And I don't think that that's the original design. The original design is that we can alter the states within, and by doing so, alter the states on the outside. Not just the state, alter everything on the outside. You can alter your experience, your life experience. We are all creators, and understanding the power that you possess to create. I think a lot of people they're mindless of it. They're not mindful of it. You know, the same capacity to create that God has, He has given man. And I think that there's very little conversation around this. That for me, this is something I wish I knew earlier. You know, I just feel cheated all my life. I've just been living that way with this knowledge. And I think that more people should spend more time alone, going in and understanding that there's a world that resides. There's a world where thoughts, emotions, you know, your internal environment, right, is a world that determines what your external environment or external world will look like. Then, you know, as regards what the future holds for me, I'm definitely going to be one of, if not the biggest proponent on the mind and the message of the mind. I know that this is a message that I have to take to the world. And that's what I've started doing with the science of astounding results. Whilst we've been doing it online now, what I really do see is me going to various physical locations across the globe to organize conferences, you know, seminars where people would learn how powerful they are just as human beings. People would realize how they've been deprived of this knowledge and this power that God has given them, and how they can begin to utilize all that power, energy to alter, you know, their circumstances and situations that they're experiencing in life. You know, I just want people to feel empowered, to recognize that they are not victims. They're the creators of their realities, right? And I think that with everything that's happening in the world, there's so much negativity, so much bad news, so much bad things happening. 2020 was a major trigger, right? Some of these circumstances and situations may still happen, but we've been made to believe that these things just happened. You know, we can't explain them. I believe we're the creators of our realities. And until we begin to shift the consciousness of humanity, those kinds of things will keep happening. And in order to change the game, we need to change the game within. So it's a huge assignment. And I see this message going to the altar, as in going across the globe to Australia, to America, to England, you know, to Asia, different parts of the world, as physical events, also online events, right? That definitely is something that I see from my consulting practice, right? We definitely are going global, right? Being able to consult not just for, you know, local, when I mean local, I mean organizations within the country, but also organizations across the globe, right? Having branches all across the world that will be providing, you know, consulting interventions for corporate institutions, right? And with my foundation, right, our goal is to solve problems of unemployment and underemployment. So being able to create pathways for people to be able to create jobs, you know, I'm big on Africa. So what we're doing currently in Nigeria to be able to spread it beyond, you know, Nigeria to other parts of Africa, right, to the northern parts of Africa, East Africa, right, whilst we're doing some stuff in West Africa, but can we also extend it to South Africa, you know, across the globe, and having volunteers, networks all across, you know, Africa that that, are being impacted through the vision to solve this, youth unemployment issue. I think that is what the future holds.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, you've probably touched on it. Any question I haven't asked you yet that you don't like to be asked?
I think you've asked.
Okay. Who would you like me to interview next?
I usually, anytime I'm asked this question, Steve Harris, Jimmy Tewe,
Okay.
Praise for Tunji Babajide.
That's Bankole Williams, the mind surgeon, founder and principal consultant at LYD Consulting, and founder of Live Your Dreams Africa. Thank you for listening to our show this week. If you liked it, do leave us a review, a comment, and share with your friends. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend and to tell another friend. We would also love to read from you, so please do send us a tweet or leave a comment on Instagram at OriginsAF. You can also write to us at originsafricapodcast@gmail.com. Remember, do subscribe at wherever you get your podcast: Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, amongst others. Catch our 1-to-1 newsletter where we share with you one lesson, 2 quotes, and 1 question from each episode published. You'll find it at originsafrica.substack.com. originsafrica.substack.com. And of course, if you like it, please click the like button, leave a comment, share with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe. Join us next time as we have a chat with Buki George Taylor. She's the founder and managing director of Robert Taylor Media, as well as the founder of MyCrawl app. I'm Oshaya, and you've been listening to Origins Africa podcast. Bye for now.
My father told me life is not a bed of roses. You gotta put your way into the plastic.